Those who played Rollercoaster Tycoon may remember the expansion pack Corkscrew Follies. More specifically, you may remember the scenario Funtopia, a small park split by a highway connected only by a few narrow pedestrian bridges. It's a scenario with a unique challenge, and it's also home to one of RCT's most iconic roller coasters, Grapevine, a well-paced, intense B&M standing coaster that became a favorite across the Rollercoaster Tycoon community. Today we're finding out whether this iconic Rollercoaster Tycoon coaster translates into Planet Coaster 2, or if it's better left pixelated. Hello everyone, welcome back to TH Designs. Today we are back with the Rollercoaster Tycoon translation series, coming hot off of the last video that we did, which we introduced these scenario coasters, rather than the pre-built coasters. We did Agoraphobia and Claustrophobia, which are maybe the most iconic, arguably, Rollercoaster Tycoon scenario coasters. They are from Diamond Heights. You can actually see them right here. That was a really fun video. If you have not seen that, I recommend that you go check it out. I feel we did a really good job, and it was received really well by you guys. And today we are doing the most requested one from last video, and that is Grapevine, which is a pretty interesting coaster. It's a lot more simple than the Agoraphobia and Claustrophobia that we did, and it's much more of a standalone coaster that's very intense, but its interaction with the highway is very interesting, and I feel like it'd be very fun to do, so here we are doing it. So let's jump over into Rollercoaster Tycoon, and let's talk about the build. We are in Rollercoaster Tycoon. If we check the scenarios list, you can see in the Corkscrew Follies expansion pack, that is where Funtopia lies, which is the scenario in which Grapevine is in. The big selling point on this scenario is that there is a highway that splits the entire park. Anybody that's played this expansion pack or this scenario knows this park. It's pretty infamous for that splitting of the highway. You have to connect it with different pathways or potentially different transportation rides, and it comes with a very fun and interesting coaster, which is Grapevine right here in the yellow. Very interesting color scheme. You can see that bright yellow track with that kind of like purple magenta-ish supports with the maroon train, if you want to even call it that. There's a lot of things to like about this coaster, and the first thing to like is the stats. I mean, the stats on this thing are phenomenal, especially for a Rollercoaster Tycoon scenario coaster. 7.9 is extremely high excitement. 9.5 is a little steep on the intensity before a stand-up coaster, which is what this is. It's actually not that bad. They lean naturally intense. When I first looked at this build, I actually thought it was just the regular twister coaster, but it's actually the stand-up coaster. So that model does exist in game, and that's one we will be using. So let's jump over to Planet Coaster, and let's talk about where we're going to build this. So here is the map that we've been building all of our Rollercoaster Tycoon builds in. You can see all the different pre-build coasters that we've done. We also had some Thrillville ones at one point, but we unfortunately lost those, but they are encapsulated in the video that we did. Like I mentioned earlier, we have the first scenario coaster that we have done in this series, which was Agoraphobia and Claustrophobia, which is a pretty big dueling coaster that kind of embed themselves in the landscape. This was a very fun build to do. It came out awesome. It's really fun to look at, especially with all the terrain around it. Now, the idea for where we build Grapevine, we could easily build it here, but I do want to leave some space because we will be back to the pre-builds, and I want to make sure that we're leaving enough space for those. Could argue they could throw it over here, but I'm just going to create a new map. Here we are in that new map. I just figured it's better because we have all the space that we'd ever want to work with. We don't interfere with the pre-build coaster POVs and things like that. So now we have a second world that we will build the remainder of our scenario coasters, because besides Grapevine and besides Agoraphobia and Claustrophobia, there are plenty others that you guys have suggested and also that I have on my mind. So this series is far from over, just deciding that we should expand to a new park. Like we saw in Rollercoaster Tycoon, this is a stand-up coaster, and a stand-up coaster, B&M stand-up coaster specifically, is in Planet Coaster, and that's what we will be using. I just have to find it quick. I initially thought it was this one, which is basically the equivalent of the twister coaster, which we've seen plenty of times in our pre-build series thus far. But it is actually this one, which is the stand-up coaster. So this is what we will be using for Grapevine, which is perfect. Now, it's similar to what we did with Agoraphobia and Claustrophobia. I did a lot of the terrain, but I didn't do any of the pathing or any of the flat rides or anything. This is such a small scenario. I don't see why we can't. Definitely the highway. The highway is an absolute guarantee, but maybe we do the Ferris wheel, these tunnels and all that fun stuff, these trees. That's easy. Maybe even this boomerang. What's this called? Defibrillator? What is that? Defibrillator. Defibrillator. I cannot say that word. Anyway, we'll probably recreate that on the side, but the main course is of course Grapevine. So let's get straight into it. Let's turn those height markers on so we can see where we are starting. Of course, as I preface in every video, thanks to this comment from a few episodes ago, we have to remember that there's about a 33 more or less increase in the heights in game in Planet Coaster than what you see in Rollercoaster Tycoon. We also have to remember that the station in Planet Coaster is already about 10 feet off the ground, so we actually don't need to raise the station that much. And then we are about a 100-foot chain lift, so more or less we're going to translate that to probably like 130. with a little pre-drop turnaround into a big drop. So I'm going to build this right to the end of this drop, and then we can talk about all the elements that follow up afterwards, and we can start to get this rolling. So I'm going to try and build this towards a corner, and yeah, we will skip this part because it's only the chain lift. I don't think that's the most fascinating thing ever. All right, there is that done. Pretty easy stuff. You can see we are at 131 feet, so we have that little pre-drop with a pretty swift turn to the left, and then a pretty basic drop, trying to keep that that drop pretty shallow because it is a stand-up coaster with a spectacular crash as usual. We have to try and keep in mind that these G-forces have to be very, very gentle and sensitive because it is a stand-up coaster and we're not trying to break knees here. So with that in mind, we of course enter this loop as you see it going through right now, which says it's 85 feet, and then it goes up to a 70-foot airtime hill, and then it goes down a little bit. Yeah, I'm gonna build the loop because the loop is massive, and then probably touch up about here, and then we'll figure out how we're gonna approach this spaghetti bowl kind of mess. Alright, there's the loop and that little big airtime hill thing. That's kind of an unconventional element, but it exists. The loop looks pretty good from the side angle, but it's a little kind of wonky when you're looking at it straight on. The height that we are at is 103, which is coming off a 125-foot drop. As for the speed of the train, let's take a look at it. From what I saw, it looked pretty good. I had to raise this one, the second airtime hill, higher, but the loop is pretty much perfect. That's a really good speed, especially for a stand-up coaster. There's going to be some heavy G-forces there, but that's okay. And yeah, that looks really good. It's much better than what you see in game here. I mean, that sharp angle straight up is just going to literally snap legs. But we are currently about right here, which is perfect because it's basically just above the first part of the station, which in game is more or less where we are ending up, which for how hard translation could be from one game to another, that's actually not that bad. So you see the train going in through now, it goes up a few feet and then it goes through this big kind of sidewinder. I don't know, I'm a little rusty on my Wheel of Wonders elements. We are right here and we are going to go straight up about 15 feet or so into that half corkscrew, into that huge half loop underneath the last piece of the station, so that's important. And then we have this extremely awkward element here. I don't even know what you would call this, where it like banks up to the left into a little airtime hill and then banks to the right completely into a 180. I don't know, these vertical pieces, these are like the worst pieces to translate from one game to another because like these just don't really exist realistically. So I think I'm gonna try my best to build it to here, and then we're entering another huge loop where then we have like these big like S-bend and stuff. We'll figure that out in the next phase of the time lapse. For now, we're gonna attack this sidewinder and then this awkward Grapevine specific element. Unless somebody, I'm sure somebody in the comments could probably name this element, but to me it doesn't look like anything specific. It almost looks like some kind of like weird top hat. Alright, there's the top hat thing and the sidewinder done. This moment here is very awkward. You know, as you see in game, it goes straight down like that and then up into a flat piece. It's kind of hard to recreate that. I'm probably going to take another stab at that on like the final kind of recap. But generally you can see with the train going through, it's not the worst. It makes the layout pretty well. The top hat looks pretty good. The G-forces seem reasonable. It's probably pretty tight there. But overall, it's not that bad. I'm not a huge fan of this part. I will fix it, but for now, let's just move on. So we are currently in this tunnel part. We are now entering into a loop, which this last one was 85 feet. This one is 65 feet. Then we have this big like S-bend thing, which actually looks like a really fun element, into this like half helix. And we continue kind of with the S-bend idea into a barrel roll. So I'm going to build just before the barrel roll, then we can talk about this big finale and the sea serpent. Don't see a sea serpent very often. That's what this is. That's exciting. Keep that in mind when we get there. But anyway, for now, I'm going to build this loop and I'm going to build the S-bend that follows afterwards and rises up into the second S-bend going into that barrel roll. Alright, so there's the second loop done, as well as the big S-bend into like this kind of helix moment into the second S-bend heading into that barrel roll that we are going to attack next. This S-bend is pretty nice. It's about 30 miles per hour going into this S-bend, which is exactly what you see in Roller Coaster Tycoon. You can actually see it on the graph right here, that this is the train going through this segment of track, and you can see that it's staying steadily at about 30 miles per hour, which is that line there. So far we are staying pretty realistic. Now we have a barrel roll into another one of these drops, almost like with the inverted element of that one, into another kind of helix similar to what we just had there, into some more S-bends, into a shallow drop, into a sea serpent. For those who don't watch our Wheel of Wonders video where we let a wheel randomly decide the next element on every single coaster in our park, a sea serpent is on that wheel, and it is an element on a few of our coasters, and it's essentially a cobra roll if it was kind of split to keep going in the same direction that it's coming. So this is a very, very fun element. I'm going to build everything here in this time lapse until just after the sea serpent, and then we can attack the finale, which is really not much. It's just this little helix here and then into the final break run. So pretty straightforward stuff. Before we jump into that, you can see the train actually going through the layout now. Pretty good speed. When it gets up here, it is at 30 miles per hour. It looks way more lethargic than it does in Roller Coaster Tycoon, despite being the same speed. It is probably a little bit more drawn out, but like I said at the beginning, we're trying to really prioritize the G-forces here, so it kind of has to be. Alright, there's the S-bends, the helixes, the drops, whatever you want to exactly call the elements, and the sea serpent done. It goes through all of it pretty well. Pretty good speed. I had it go down like gradually, which of course you don't see in game, but probably what you would realistically see in real life. And yeah, the speed on this is pretty good. If anything, it's actually a little too aggressive there. All in all, this is coming together pretty nicely, and we are approaching the finale, which is pretty easy. Depending on how easy it is, I may not even show the time lapse. We may jump straight to the scenery building. Looking in game, you actually see the train go through the element that we just built now into that sea serpent, which we actually will have to lower that so it's subterranean. Then it jumps up sharply, which we won't be able to do it that sharply, but then it goes into a curve, into a big helix, into that smaller helix, and then up into the brake run, which is right there. There really isn't a brake run at all. It just goes straight into the station. So I'm going to build that, and I may include time lapse, I may not, but at the very least, we will be doing the scenery and the rest of the park afterwards. Alright, there's the entire layout done. I also adjusted some of the other things that were not exactly as we wanted them. Specifically, I'm talking about before the Sidewinder here. That looks much more like what you see in game here. The finale is pretty straightforward. Basic helix, double helix almost, into the brake run. Well, into the station. I extended the station one more tile, so we are officially going underneath the station. I also did a little bit more terraforming just to kind of keep it somewhat realistic. Technically, there's no terraforming underneath the station, but because the stations are so much thinner in Roller Coaster Tycoon than they are in Planet Coaster, I just kind of accounted for it like that. We see the coaster here going through the finale at a pretty reasonable speed. We're consistently sitting around 30 to 40 miles per hour. Towards the latter half of the layout, which is what you see in game. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to finish all the supports, get the exact coloring done, color the trains, make everything look good, add these little wooden shed things, all these little details for just the coaster specifically, and then we could talk about the pathing, the highway, this other coaster. We'll see how far we want to go. We'll be using this park for other installations as well, so I don't want to take up too much space. So yep, I'm going to cut over to that, and when I see you next, the entire coaster itself will be done. Alright, there are the color scheme, the supports, and these little kind of wooden shelter things, head chopper moments, they're all done. The terrain has been adjusted a little bit and painted green to kind of hide that that slope a little bit more like you see in Roller Coaster Tycoon. Now the next task is things like the highway, the path. If we decide to do that, I am tempted to do this corkscrew, this boomerang, but I question how much it's going to take because we still have that highway. I'm actually going to build that highway now, and we'll kind of figure out if it makes sense to do the boomerang and the Ferris wheel and the path. But to be honest, I think it does. I think the footprint won't change too much. So I'm going to do that, and I will see you when that is done. All right, there's the highway and then all the fence work done. Pretty standard stuff, to be honest, but it does look pretty cool when put underneath the coaster like that. And it does look pretty accurate to what you see in Roller Coaster Tycoon. As for the pathing, probably recreate the pathing on this side and this loop and the boomerang and the Ferris wheel. That won't be a problem, but the pathing in the back will be. So especially like this corner here with the exit and the queue and everything. I don't know if that really makes sense, and let me show you why. So you see all the terraforming that was kind of loosely done here because it looks better than that. Like in game, you have that like very orthogonal 45-degree kind of terrain tool that doesn't really exist in any capacity in Planet Coaster. Yeah, so I think in order to like avoid like a sharp wall here, because this is like technically accurate, I think we have to avoid the path on this side, but that's okay. It's a side piece of the actual main attraction. So what I will do is I will do the path at least by the Ferris wheel, which will probably be around here. I will do the pedestrian bridge over, and then that boomerang, all of which you can see in game here. So I'm going to do that quick, and then that's probably going to be a wrap for this video. One coaster that was relatively simple to do, but definitely a very fun one. And it's a stand-up, which we haven't seen on this channel in a long time. Alright, everything is just about finished. You can see I added the Ferris wheel and the boomerang, the defibrillator. I think I'm saying that right. I can't say that word. The coaster looks really nice. I kind of took some liberties in adding a little bit more greenery and rocks than what you see in game. When in Roller Coaster Tycoon, you can see it's relatively kind of sparse with the trees, but you can see there are some that are kind of tucked in the actual layout themselves, and I tried to honor that a little bit in Planet Coaster. I also did some kind of ground texturing just a little bit, just to kind of give it a sense of some kind of realism. But overall, I mean, you still have like floating elements like you see in the Roller Coaster Tycoon version, so there's an element of fantasy while also kind of giving it a touch of the Planet Coaster realism. You can see I added like the little bit of path, not all of the path, because in game it goes all the way around. I added it just here as if it was going up to the station. Same over here with the queue lines. So just kind of loose kind of decorating and theming, but more than what we've done in the past to kind of give it some complementary kind of decoration. I actually have not checked the stats whatsoever. I imagine they're actually probably going to be a little low because the train kind of averages around 30 miles per hour, which typically isn't too impressive in the Planet Coaster score rating. I was completely wrong, like absolutely wrong. That's an interesting number for the excitement, but that is a very good number, at least relative to roller coaster ratings. Very high excitement, very impressive fear, and a nausea that's a little high. Typically it doesn't break 1, but it is in the green, so we are good. I thought that the ratings for this coaster were going to be really low, but those are some of the more impressive stats that we've had on any coaster that we've ever made on this channel, so kudos to Grapevine for that. As for the specific stats, max speed of 63 and average speed of 32, which I thought would have been a little low. Max vertical g-force of 4.86 is a little high, but actually not as bad as I thought compared to some of the G's that you see in Roller Coaster Tycoon. -2 is pretty rough. I'm assuming that that's happening here. So, really the question that we ask in every one of these episodes is, does it translate? And I would say yes, it does translate. Really what I'm looking at is, does it complete the layout at a reasonable speed? Are the elements relatively simple to translate? Does the coaster look fun? Does it look fun to ride? Does it have good stats? And yeah, I think that this checks off at least most of those boxes, and it was a really, really fun coaster to make and a really good opportunity to kind of do something unique with this road kind of thrown in the middle of it, so why not? This was a really fun installation to the series, not the park. We will have more in here. This guy sits all alone for now. But yeah, let's jump over to a little mini cinematic similar to what we did with Agoraphobia and Claustrophobia, and then we will do the POV, which I think you guys will really enjoy. It's not the smoothest coaster in the world. There are some really tight elements, especially looking at that sea serpent, but overall it is a very interesting ride. I'm curious to see what your thoughts in the comments are, and would you ride this, I guess is the question. Do take care everyone, and keep an eye out for some new videos. We have Wheel of Wonders coming out soon, where we'll be actually adding some new elements, so keep an eye out for that. I will see you then.